We're very blessed at Beth Yeshurun, and we always have been. There's always been young people who've grown up in our congregation and decided to become Jewish professionals, whether educators, cantors, rabbis. Right now at Beth Yeshurun, we have two young men who grew up in our congregation. Many of you heard Neil Teibel over the holidays, and as you know, or you may know, he's studying to be a cantor at the Jewish Theological Seminary. And many of you have also had the pleasure in the past, and perhaps this past Rosh Hashanah, when he led our teen service, is Kevin Lefkowitz. And Kevin is in his third year of rabbinical school at the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies in Los Angeles, where I went to rabbinical school and Rabbi Fort went to rabbinical school. And those of you who don't know Kevin, let me just tell you a little bit about him. Kevin grew up, as I said, here, and also went to Barron Academy. Kevin came every Shabbos with his parents, Jeff and Beth, and he would come here every Shabbat with his three siblings, triplets, his two sisters, and his younger brother, and he'd be here every Shabbat. So it was no real surprise when he came to me when he was in college at the University of Texas at Austin to tell me that he's considering going to rabbinical school. And I was thrilled. He was a young man that was brought up to love his Judaism. He loves the state of Israel, as his family has for generations. You should also know that he's a great baseball player. He played center field for Bel Air High School, which is no small feat. As you know, it's a pretty impressive high school baseball program there. But not only will I know Kevin will make an outstanding rabbi in a few years when he graduates because of how much he's already learned and how well he knows our history and our traditions in Hebrew after he spent a year in Israel just a few years ago when he went to year course in between high school and college. But I think what also, more importantly, will make Kevin a great rabbi is he's someone we can all relate to. He's a mensch. He's a wonderful young man who loves inspiring people of all ages. For the last 2 summers, he's worked at Camp Ramah in California, and he's worked on the curriculum to integrate Judaism and sports to make it fun and exciting for the young people. And I know that the kids liked him and thought he was pretty cool because my daughter said, you know, Dad, that kid, Kevin Lefkowitz, he's a pretty cool kid. She probably thinks he's much cooler than her father. So tonight, we thought while Kevin's here leading different programs and services at Beth Yeshurun over the high holidays, that we invited him to give the sermon tonight for Shabbat Shuvah this Friday night. And I want to welcome his very proud parents, Jeff and Beth. And Miriam, we think, of course, of your late husband. He's in our prayers, Jacob. It's a pleasure to have you here. And Ronnie, another proud grandmother as well. And it's a pleasure now. And please join me now in welcoming Kevin Lefkowitz to address us this evening.
Thank you, Rabbi Strauss. That was an incredible introduction. It was the end of my first year in rabbinical school, and my teacher, Rabbi Pat Fenton, decided that we should have our final exam over brunch. So we get there, and the restaurant is almost completely empty. I'm perfectly dressed for the occasion in an athletic gray t-shirt, and this will be important later, and they seat us in the far corner over by the bathrooms. So it's just us and this family of tourists that's sitting in the other corner of this fairly spacious room. Well, at some point, I get up to use the restroom, and it's one of those unisex bathrooms with a sink and a toilet. I test the knob, and it's unlocked. So I walk in, and I see a woman standing there looking at herself in the mirror, completely naked. I don't need to wait for the scream before I slam the door and scamper back to my table. Well, about 15 minutes later, she comes out of the bathroom yelling, "Why didn't you knock? You stupid boy, why didn't you knock?" Only she wasn't yelling at me. Oh no, she was yelling at my poor classmate who also happened to be wearing a gray t-shirt. I tell you what, I was pretty thankful that she didn't know it was me. But I don't bring up this story to tell you the same old thing about getting away with bad actions or living with integrity, both extremely important things, especially in these days. I felt terrible. Stupid boy, why didn't I knock? I will likely never see her again, and if I do, neither of us will remember the other. But it's likely that we will both remember that episode in our own ways. Her memory of absolute humiliation, is mine that I thought was funny enough to say today. We have no ongoing relationship with each other, but we will both likely remember this scene forever. Let's think about that for a second. We have no ongoing relationship. I don't even know her name. Yet she has already made it into this sermon thousands of miles from where she lives. Would I have sat quietly while she yelled at my classmate if she had been my friend, not admitted to it? In these Yamim Noraim, the high holidays, we think introspectively and consider how our actions impact others. But do we ever take the time to consider how we act differently around people depending on what type of relationship we have with them? In this week's Torah portion, Vayelech, we learn that God does just that. God tells Moses, the long-standing partner and leader of the Jewish people, to step down. He would not get to enter the promised land. And worse, that the people will abandon God and be punished for it. Well, if anyone has a right to worry, it's Moses at this time. He had led this stiff-necked people for 40 years in the wilderness and picked them up after they fell, time and time again. Standing before the land and preparing for war, this is when they needed him most. He was their leader. I think God recognizes this fact, this fear in Moses, and acts accordingly. God tells Moses a poem and tasks him to teach it to the Israelites as a reminder that every time they go astray, they can say this poem and they'll come back to God. This act will serve as his last, final act of leadership of the Jewish people, and he can die in peace. But would the poem really save the Israelites? I haven't seen any record of this poem being recited. I'm saying the poem, I didn't know it existed before reading this Torah portion just this week. If there's any record of the people reciting this poem in times of need, you'd think that we would have heard it. There have been plenty of times of need. If anything, I think that God recognizes that Moses needed one last teaching moment so that he could die, as I said, in peace, not for the Israelites, but for him. But when God speaks with Joshua, the new leader of the Israelites, who is about to step in for Moses and prepare for war, God says, "Be strong, everything will be okay." That's it. This directly contradicts what God had said to Moses just, a couple sentences, verses prior. But God sees this first interaction as a pep talk, a way to give confidence to Joshua. Whereas Moses deserved the truth and needed a feeling of peace, Joshua needed to feel comforted and confident that his role as the leader will be successful. Think about your strongest relationships. Are they all the same? Raise your hand if you speak to your friends the same way you speak to a parent, or spouse, or business associate. What about child or grandchild? That would be absurd. We could take it even deeper. Of your close friends, do you do the same things with all of them? I know I don't. I watch sports with some, play trivia with others, learn Torah with another group. We relate to and form relationships with different people in different ways, and that's fine. We shouldn't do the same activities with everybody, but we should treat them the same. I want to get a little more personal. I've been thinking a lot about relationships lately, not because my mom likes to ask me if I've been dating anyone, but because this summer, my Zadie passed away. It was a huge loss for the community and a bigger loss for us. My siblings and I spent 3 days a week at Bubby and Zadie's house. We spent Shabbat dinner there, birthdays, celebrations, everything in between. I can speak for hours about him and our relationship, but the main point is that Zadie was an extremely important man in my life, and I knew him so well as Zadie. It was when he died that I learned more about Jacob Lefkowitz. I learned that he was the only teenager in Houston trusted to smuggle weapons to pre-state Palestine to help build the state of Israel. I learned that when his neighbor got trapped under his car and an oil change gone wrong, Zadie lifted the car off of him and saved his life. I learned that when his friend got sick, he ran that man's bike store for a month. I spent 3 days a week for almost my entire life with him, and I had never heard these stories. I knew him very well as a grandson. I cannot say I knew Jacob Lefkowitz in his entirety. And that's okay. We can't know every aspect of everyone. Think about the woman who serves you coffee at Starbucks or the guy who delivers your mail. Do you know their loves, desires, dreams, or regrets? I guarantee you they do have people in their lives that do. We don't have to and shouldn't know everything about everyone. We shouldn't even treat them the same. But we can treat everyone with the same dignity. When that jerk cuts us off because clearly he or she has a personality flaw, but when we do it, it's because we didn't see the car. I'm sorry, it's a mistake. What if we give others the same benefit of the doubt that we give ourselves? This reminds me of a classic Hasidic story about the Brisker Rebbe. The story has many incarnations, but this one is my favorite. Rav Chaim Soloveitchik of Brisk used to dress up as a poor man whenever he traveled so that he can learn how the poor people live. One day, on his way to a neighboring village in Eastern Europe, he dressed up in his familiar rags, put on a little dirt on his face, and got on the train. Immediately, a wealthy man began berating him because of his appearance. The ridicule ceased only when the rich man threw him out onto the other train cart. He couldn't even sit with him on the same cart. When the train finally got to the village, the huge crowd had assembled to welcome this famous rabbi. The rich man, seeing how he had royally messed up, got on his knees and started begging, "Please, Rabbi, forgive me. You must forgive me. I had no idea." Rav Chaim Soloveitchik shook his head and said, "I cannot forgive you, for I'm the rabbi you revere. You must go ask the poor man on the train for forgiveness. He's the one you treated with contempt." The rich man clearly didn't value Rav Chaim Soloveitchik as an individual. He respected the rabbinic position. And while valuing the rabbinic position is a great thing for me, I can't imagine that it's so great for building a society that elevates each and everyone. As my Rabbi Brad Artson, Dean of Ziegler Rabbinical School, commonly poses, what would happen if we thought of every homeless person as though they were our friend, parent, or sibling? How would we treat them differently? I'm reminded of one more classic story. Sarah gets home from work promptly at 6, just like she always does. Before she has a chance to sit down, her roommate Carla starts yelling at her. "Why don't you go grocery shopping? Take your shoes off before stepping on the rug. You said you'd take out the trash this morning. What are you doing?" This nagging and yelling goes on for about a half an hour, till Sarah finally cuts her off and says, "Listen, I hear you. I can't handle this right now. So why don't we start over? I'm going to go outside. I'm going to come back in, and we can start fresh." Carla agrees. So Sarah goes outside, puts her stuff down, walks back in, and Carla greets her at the door. "Where have you been? You're a half an hour late." Unlike Sarah, we have an opportunity here to start fresh. In these Yamim Noraim, high holidays, let's remember to see people for who they are and take seriously the belief that everyone was made B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. To treat everyone with dignity and to leave our preconceived notions at the door. Of course, before walking in, stupid boy or girl, always remember to knock. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Kevin, and I think you saw what I was speaking about. We are very blessed, the Jewish people. So thank you, Kevin, for your wonderful message as we go from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. Let us now rise.